It's The Executive Edge with Sue Firth. The podcast that gives you an edge in life and business with practical skills that you can apply to achieve and maintain success.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of The Executive Edge. Now this is the podcast for skills in life and in business. And today I have Ashley Quinto Powell. Ashley, it's a real joy having you on the show. Please tell us a bit more about you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an author and a speaker. And I'm very, very passionate about the idea that women should have it all without doing it all like we have been doing for a very long time now.
We do it all, I think, sometimes because we get set up for that, if I may. I mean, that's kind of cultural expectations. Maybe we even without thinking kind of enter into it. What do you think are the main reasons why we find ourselves stuck in this loop a bit?
Well, certainly there's societal expectations. We looked at our mothers doing everything, and we think that is what we should do too. Our partners aren't necessarily carrying their own weight all the time. And I think as much as we appreciate a helpful partner, they really need to be doing 50% or more. And I think we also take on enormous cognitive load that we're not even aware that we're taking on. So, that's sort of a lot wrapped in there, but there's a lot to unpack in why we feel like we have to take everything on.
Yeah, but I think that's really great. And thank you, because it's a good start. Because what it's really saying in so many words is part of this gets set up around us and we just step on that process because that's what we believe. But also part of it means that you can release yourself. You can empower yourself. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to that positive point. Where do we begin? Do we begin by keeping it small at first while our kids are young, or what do we need to do?
Well, that's a great question. I didn't keep it small while my kids were young, and I rejected that advice. It seemed so ridiculous to me that I would be on a career trajectory that was pointed nothing but up and then stagnate. And the advice that I was given was, well, wait until your youngest is through kindergarten before you go for another promotion. With 2 kids, that's a decade. And that is really not fair to the women on our teams, in our workplaces. And it certainly is not fair to our executive pipelines. We can't expect people who are on a rocket to now plateau for a decade. It just is not. I mean, it was not in my genes to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was ever something that you could do. Just stay right there in the same place. And I think it's so much more about opening up all aspects of your life and figuring out, great, how do I do this, and how do I enable my entire life to be focused on not getting buried in this mom trap. And for me, having a partner was a really important part of that. I'm lucky enough to have a partner who carries more than his weight. And part of that also is the project management of our homes. That's I refer to the cognitive load, but often we know that project management is a big job when it's at work, but when it's at home, we take it on without thinking about it. For instance, how many, I bet as most women do, how far you are away from running out of toilet paper, and which cereal you need, and where the milk is, and who needs dentist appointments coming up, and when dance class happens. Well, that is a huge job at work. At home, we consider it just our duty.
That is such a brilliant point to make, Ashley. For some reason, I think we also get afraid, and if I may, I'm using that term. Perhaps you might apply a different one, but I think we get afraid to ask for help, or we get afraid to pay for it even. So, for example, paying a cleaner or paying for someone to do our ironing, because of the cultural expectations wrapped around the idea that we shouldn't,
yes,
or we mustn't allow someone into our home in order to see that actually it's not as tidy as it could be. And I think these are leftover demands, expectations, drivers they don't seem as relevant now to the entrepreneurial women who are telling themselves in another breath that they are super capable and yet allowing themselves to be dumbed down in the next.
Ugh,
so is some of it perhaps an internal dialogue? Is that the place to start? Or do we just shove all that lot aside, step out and start project managing things better?
Oh, what a fabulous reframing. It is very, very difficult to ask for help. I think that's one of the things. I started a virtual assistant agency, and it's seemingly out of nowhere. And one of the things I am most fascinated by in that business is how and why it is so difficult to ask for help. I mean, to your point, it can be embarrassing to have someone, look at your dirty closets, both in business and in your actual home. And it feels like we're saying we can't do it, and we're trained to muscle through. We're trained to pull up our own bootstraps, and really, we are very good at that. And mostly, whether you're a corporate woman or an entrepreneur, you've gotten where you are because you're very, very good at figuring things out, putting your head down, getting it done, and as we advance in our career, again, no matter what sector you're in, we tend to switch from task-based productivity to strategy-based productivity. And that strategy requires time. And we tend to be still in the habit of judging our own productivity by how many tasks we can tick off in the gigantic to-do list. And I think we have to make a choice. Do we want to be stuck in the little tasks, or do we want to be focused on the big, exciting, business moving things that are up at the top at the strategy? And I always pick strategy.
Great. I love that. I mean, I love, curiously, I don't think I could have expressed it as well as you, but I think it's definitely something that's driven me for a number of years. I remember being stood on the school playground and listening to a lot of the moms who were around me, and they were all talking about their kids. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to be doing. I just knew that I had 2 degrees. I had somewhere else I needed to get to. Now I dropped my little ones off, and I needed to get home, wanted to go home in order to get on with the next part of my day. The length of my to-do list notwithstanding, that was my driver. I judged myself because I wasn't willing to stand in that school playground. Mm-hmm. But equally, the lovely moms don't need to judge me as if I am somehow bad or worse or anything else. So I think the first thing you have to do is free yourself. I think you have to free yourself from these norms, these expectations, and do what Ashley is saying and believe in the fact that you can work out a strategy for how to do this, but try to stop measuring yourself on the same norms that seem to have existed for years. And go with what you think is right for you. So where do we go to next? Does a mom, even if their kids have got older, need to decide that actually, for me to play to my strengths, I need to bring on a team? What's kind of next?
Well, I do think so getting help and getting great help is really important. And of course, it's one of the reasons that I started my company the way that I did. But, that's not a privilege that many people have. I think claiming the self-advocacy that's needed in order to have a really balanced relationship with your partner is also critical. And then I think we are doing things we just don't need to do. They don't add joy. Even parts of parenting are woefully administrative. And I think women can decide for themselves which parts of parenting they consider to be in that category. I consider making lunches, for instance, very much in the administrative category. It doesn't bring me joy. I absolutely hate it. There is no way that I want to break into my morning or my evening making these silly lunches. And so I don't, which means that the kids are still taken care of. Of course, they can pay for lunch at school, or they can make their own. Thankfully, they're old enough for that. But I've just decided that that's not something I'm going to be concerned with. And releasing all of those things is a really important part of the process. There's just things that we're doing that are absolutely not necessary.
So is the kind of next step then, after you've, as you've said it so beautifully, advocated for yourself, worked out what you're passionate about, decided that you want to turn that into a business, is it about being brave and then having that conversation with your partner so that you can start to work out some kind of better equality over splitting the jobs? Or is it basically get that infrastructure right in the business first of all? Because otherwise you're full of ideas and you're full of the greatest next thing that you think you'll launch. But ultimately, have you really thought through how you're going to do this in life? So what do you think?
Oh, I think it's a great opportunity to make the conversation with your partner an ongoing one. I give the example quite a lot of how early in my marriage, my husband would say, I'm happy to help. You just have to tell me how. And it took years for us to get to a place where, first of all, I could articulate that I did not want to create the to-do list for him. I didn't want to project management him. I didn't want to project manage him. I needed him to look around and, like a fully grown adult human man, decide that things needed to be done of his own volition. And, that's a mindset shift. I think when we started that argument, I would have been, I would have been complacent in essentially adopting that duty as mine. And he would have felt like a great partner because he had asked, what do you need? And unfortunately, we just need to go many steps further than that and identify, well, the dishes are dirty. I don't need anyone to tell me that they are dirty. I will just take care of them. And once you have communication there, things change really, really dramatically. And I think sometimes that also means we have to give things up in meaningful ways. Our egos love that kids have a boo-boo and come running to us. And our egos love that we are the only one who can put a baby down, but that's a trap. And if we identify it as a trap, we can get out from under it.
Okay, that's a really great point too. So in the same way as we need to sort of partner successfully and communicate better at home, what do we need to do within our businesses so that we can free ourselves to get on better?
Well, I think that the thing that would make the biggest difference in our work environments is encouraging the men around us to take their paternity leaves when they're offered them, to really be involved in their kids' lives as well. I firmly believe that when this is no longer a woman's issue, and frankly, I think we shortchange our partners, and especially the men in our offices, around not having great relationships with their kids because they're expected to be at work. And being a parent that is one of life's greatest honors, and that we don't think our partners are up for it should be something that we are actively working on. So I think encouraging. The long and the short is that we should encourage the men in our lives and in our offices to take their place as great fathers and great partners.
So although I'm stating the obvious here, I really like that as an initiative. I guess stating the obvious is that would require a personal and cultural shift, really, because sadly lots of corporates really don't encourage this well enough because they always seem to feel under threat that if you're not present, you're not productive, which comes back to your first point around task-oriented productivity, as opposed to looking at the bigger picture, which is, hey, if we give this person time to be able to go home and watch their kids do their sports day, they're going to be committed to us as a result. And also their family is going to benefit from that, which is also going to keep them happier by working for us. So seeing the bigger picture does seem to be part of this model, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And from a business's point of view, I think there's something that I've called the baby family index. That's a measure of how healthy a company is from the perspective of its employees. You can tell when you have a startup, you have a bunch of young people who don't need great insurance. They don't need longevity. If the company goes under, they will bounce back instantly. And then when that little startup starts to gain traction, you'll see that people will feel more comfortable putting down roots, getting married, having children. That's a really, really positive sign. And let's not forget that all of those people who are advancing in their lives are also advancing in their knowledge and their expertise. And protecting that really protects our senior most employees at the time when they are most vulnerable to leaving, and will create beautiful executive pipelines. In terms of needing someone to be in front of you to be positive that they are working, that's lazy management. And I wish that we had all taken the opportunity of the pandemic to understand and get way better at managing people who are not immediately in front of us, because it's not impossible, but it takes management, and we can't be lazy managers and do that well.
What about yourself then, Ashley? Are you running several businesses? Because you said before that you rather like the excitement of the entrepreneurial starting process, or are you now managing just one as a primary? I do manage one as a primary, although I certainly have. I'm an author, and I speak all over, so I would consider that very much a company too. But I think my life has been punctuated by extracurricular things that I really, really enjoy. I coach my kids' basketball teams. I'm involved with the Girl Scouts. I'm involved with the United Way. I'm very much the joiner that probably we all are. I don't really love to relax, and I'm excited about all of the things that are in front of me. And I make a very conscious effort to try to say yes to what I want to say yes to, and then parse out what pieces of that I really, really enjoy and give away the rest, either to a great virtual assistant or eliminate it altogether. I do a fair amount of automation too. So there are some really clever ways to get through a day and be focused on what am I really good at? What do I really enjoy? And how do I get out of doing all of the other nonsense? Again, I think that's a really great point. Thanks. Because one of the things I just found myself learning only in a previous podcast guest was, if you don't know what you don't know, it actually means it's quite difficult to ask a question. But you've just used the reference point of trying to automate some things that you've got or some jobs that you've got. So even if you actually just go onto Google and say, how do I automate X, Y, or Z? It's a way to begin. Open your mind to the idea that not everything should be done by you. And I think you begin that journey, really. So, I mean, what you just referred to a few minutes ago, coincidentally, in talking about being an author and also a speaker, refers to the common expression that we apply where we say we have multiple streams of income. Did you consciously make a decision that was how you felt you would connect all the dots in terms of having the money that you need to be able to run your life easily? Or did you feel that just came about because of the excitement thing where you love the next thing that's interesting? What do you think? Well, that's a really good question. And I think I would probably answer it differently depending on the day and how I'm feeling. I do think about multiple streams of income really consciously. I also think about shiny object syndrome. Those are two sides of the same coin. I'm just reading The Pumpkin Plan, which is really outstanding. And it talks about essentially building, planting small seeds and then nurturing just the big ones until they grow into a big company. And I think unconsciously, I've probably done something very, very, very similar to that. This is my 7th company. My virtual assistant company is my 7th company. I've tried networking businesses and tech businesses, and my first business was in e-commerce. And I have certainly learned my lessons along the way. Like, I should never have been in e-commerce way back then. But I think I am one of those people who loves to monetize and loves to think through business problems, and probably not unlike you and your listeners. It is a good quality, isn't it? I would say it's an excellent quality. It's an amazing quality. But I think one of the things that you're actually sharing almost by default is that it's very important to recognize what you're good at, to shine and enjoy that, not to hide that and then get fearful of that and then hold it back. And as you say, doing so in favor even of the very important process of being a parent. would, strictly speaking, be a bit like, jumping into the lake, to making all that effort to swim right into the middle of it and then somehow be expected to stay there and tread water for the next 10 years, which is really not going to happen. No. So, it does seem dumb. Now, there were a couple of other things that I felt that I came across in your bio, which really interested me. One of them was that possibly is it wrapped in terms of the things that you feel are key lessons or key things to avoid? I'm not certain. When you say there are some things that you shouldn't delegate, what do you feel those are?
The things that you shouldn't, there are things that you can't delegate that are just very, very difficult to delegate, like making medical appointments, for instance, or dickering with an insurance company in the US is something that you can't delegate. And then there are things that you love to do that you shouldn't delegate because you love to do them or they bring you joy. And there's so little that really requires all of your time and attention. When I wrote my first book, I wrote every word. And now I'm writing a book on delegation, and I will probably delegate some of that because I think that, why not? It's a book about delegation. And, but I think the things that really bring you joy, we need to be focused on diving into. And the things that don't bring us joy, we need to figure out who on our teams and in our lives does bring joy to and who really are great at those things and then pass them off.
Good point. I found that I particularly reached a favorable tipping point where I started to make enough money that it was now not only intuitively the right thing to do to pay somebody in terms of spreading the work so that I wasn't doing some of those mundane things, but also I felt it required a leap of faith in trusting that person to do it well. So sometimes it's a question of you just do it, just get started, just, find an individual, give them a go. If 6 months later it really isn't working, don't be afraid to then go and find, say, another VA or whatever it is your first point of choice. Now there are 5 and I have this team of 5. They don't work for me full time. No one needs to know that. But from my point of view, I see them as Team SF.
Of course.
They're Team Sue Firth. That's because they work with me. And they're very precious to me. And I've worked hard to find the right people. But equally, they all know that I rely on them. Therefore, I give them stuff. Therefore, I do not do many of those mundane things myself anymore. And my life is just freed up in a way which is difficult to articulate. But I think you and I can both relate to what that feels like. And therefore, that's what we're really encouraging you to do. Release your grip along with getting your act together over what's going on in your head and let go of some of the stuff that's holding you back. And I think if you can get all of those back, even if you do them on a step-by-step basis, we're getting somewhere.
Oh, yes.
So once you've got a kind of pretty successful business, and obviously it's very clear you've been able to do that, the stuff I find trips us up still is this uneven sort of sales pipeline, or we find, feast and famine in terms of our earnings, which has often thrown me off until fairly recently. So how do we smooth out our sales cycle? I know that's another thing that you've mastered more than I have.
I have. In my consultancy, I teach mostly agency owners how to smooth that cycle, but it is brutal, and it is very, very common in consulting and in agency life that we will scramble for sales and then be overwhelmed, and we'll dive into the delivery, and then we'll take a break and realize in panic, we realize we have no clients and we have to repeat the whole thing over again. The first and easiest thing is not to dive headlong into delivery and panic about how much there is to deliver. I think building a waiting list is very, very, very healthy for a business. Not only does it reassure your clients that they've done the right thing by selecting you because they have all of this great social proof, given that, and it's an okay thing to say, I can't deliver that immediately. I have quite a lot of work, but I really do want to work with you. And so looking out, here's when I can schedule you. Your clients are actually more likely to pay a premium for something that they understand is valued by other people, and especially if you're delivering a service, your clients are really looking for clues that they have made the right choice, because they really cannot compare. You can't compare widgets.
Well done.
You can't look under the hood. And so your clients are constantly looking for, did I do the right thing? Am I okay trusting this person? And so the more reassurance that you can give them is very, very healthy. So at this point, I recommend very, very strongly that people slow down their delivery times to something that is, that is still we're still working, but we are not tripping over ourselves to get 3 projects done at a time and working ridiculous hours. No one quit their corporate jobs so that they could work ridiculous hours for themselves. So slow all of that down and build a waiting list, and then stop ignoring your sales pipeline when you're stuck in delivery. So that will probably mean nurturing all of your networking contacts and nurturing the business that is simmering and waiting for you. And 2, I always feel so terrible for people who, when they get in a sales slump, think that now they have to cold call, or they have to do some terrible sales activity that they dread anyway. Actually, your next 5 clients you already know them. Can't tell you who they are, but you already know your next 5 clients. So focusing really close to home is not only more enjoyable than all of the cold calling stuff, which I think there's certainly a place for it too. But when you can talk about a waiting list, when you can talk about how great you're delivering things, you're taking your time, that pipeline will naturally become more full and pleasantly plump.
I think that's a brilliant series of tips. Thank you. And I would wholly endorse them. I found myself getting super upset when I started running out of money several years ago. This was pre-COVID. And the first piece of advice that a coincidental friend who'd also been in business for years gave me was, he said, Sue, all I need you to do for the next few days is go back over everyone you've ever worked with and write to them to check in with how they are. And I thought, I cannot believe that this person has just taught me to do something so simple. Why have I not been doing that before? And that was exactly how I just pulled myself together, started getting in touch with them, stayed in touch with them better. And of course, coincidentally, 6 of them needed my help, which then started that churn again, which gave me back my sense of confidence. And that was the only thing that starts to ebb and flow, is that you don't realize you've been paying attention to slightly the wrong thing or in slightly the wrong direction. And you just need to tweak it and pull yourself back.
Yeah.
So, Ashley, I think that's brilliant. Just tell us a little bit more about your books so people can track these down and find some really great stuff.
Sure. My book is Executive Motherhood, The Art of Having It All Without Doing It All. And it's available on Amazon and on a Kindle and as an ebook, which is safe for a minivan. I don't swear, not even once. And it ends up being a short and, I promise, funny read.
Oh, I think that's brilliant. Ashley, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your time. Now, in terms of how people can find you, I obviously found you on your website, which is pretty much your own name, isn't it? So
www.ashleyquintopowell.com.
Yeah.
I'm very, very active on LinkedIn too. And then my virtual assistant company is myva.rocks.
Ashley, that was absolutely fabulous. Thank you. There were just so many tips in there, weren't there? There were some really great things regarding the way we think and what we need to do to get out of our own way, I think. But it didn't really feel as if it was entirely just the domain of women, although I can respect the fact that we are often the primary caretakers, whether we choose to be or not in all circumstances. But I think, much of that was also pertinent for anyone else who is in their business and they need to scale or they need to think about how to do that. So I get the feeling that Ashley would be a really great person for you to reach out to. Do remember, it was www.ashleyquintopowell.com, and particularly for her virtual assistant service as well. So that's been a joy, everyone. Thanks so much for all of your attention. And there's more where that came from. You can find us on all of the major platforms. So take care for now.